Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. I am Steven and I am the host as always. Joining me today is a very special guest, Mr. Matt Holder, who covers the Raiders for SB Nation, the Silver and Black Pride. He also does some great draft content work over at Bleacher Report. So definitely recommend checking him out for draft content, Raiders content, all that good stuff. Matt, thanks for taking the time to join me tonight, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. Super excited to get closer and closer to the NFL season, as I'm sure you
Yes.
guys are as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're only a couple weeks away. It's the teasers are there and it's just so close. I mean, we got college football going on this weekend, so always a good time once the fall comes rolling around.
Yes, 100%, 100%. All right, really excited to dive into the Raiders today with Matt. I think it's a team that's maybe been a little bit undercovered this offseason, similar to the Chargers in that regard. Maybe some of that is obviously the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl this year, I guess. But let's start with obviously the biggest story of the Raiders offseason, in my opinion, which is Josh Jacobs. I mean, the Chargers had a little bit of running back drama as well. The Colts are going through it right now. Can you update our listeners on what exactly the status is of Josh Jacobs? I know he hasn't signed his franchise tender still. Is that going to happen before the season, or do you think he's going to do the Le'Veon Bell thing and hold out for the whole year?
Yeah, so the reports are everything that's all signs are pointing towards Josh Jacobs is going to sign the tag before week one. When exactly that is, if he's going to show up to maybe the last week of training camp or something like that, or just literally just show up for week one and kind of go that route, we don't really know. Josh McDaniels was actually asked about that after, or I think earlier this week, maybe on Sunday or Monday, and basically said, I don't know anything. I don't have any updates. Then there was a report that basically confirming what we knew, that Jacobs was probably going to come back. But outside of that, there's not a whole lot of clarity. There's not a whole lot of information on the situation. We pretty much knew probably a week or two before camp, or even before, and maybe even before that, it was just confirmed that Jacobs wasn't going to be at camp this year. He was going to hold out if he didn't get that they didn't get that long-term deal done like they didn't. So it's a little bit of a mystery. I wish I had a more solid answer for you guys. I'm sure all Raider fans too would too. But yeah. Interesting situation, because Jacobs did say on the reports that I was talking about earlier this week about him showing up that he's like, I don't remember saying that. So I don't know. It's kind of a big cluster right now. Again, my gut read is he's going to show up for week one. If he pulls the Le'Veon Bell route, he will sacrifice $10.1 million that will just be handed to him regardless of what he does. And no matter how much money you make, 8 figures is quite a bit of cash to just give up. So
yeah, 100%. There was that report. I forget if it was like from Mike Florio or who it was from, that the Raiders were considering like rescinding the offer and he would just become like a free agent. Did you ever buy much stock into that report?
Not really, because I know he is like a cap hit or whatever, and they clear cap space. But at this point, like, you're not finding a $10 million player on the market, right? So there isn't a huge incentive for them to do that. And that's kind of not really, the Patriot way is to protect the organization, not necessarily protect the player, which I'm sure he would love for that to do, so he can go sign a long-term contract somewhere else. But again, that's not really the MO of this new regime. So yeah, I never put too much weight into that. Could it happen? Maybe, but I think it would have by now. If they were. So I fully expect Josh Jacobs to be ready for week one, or playing for week one. How much he'll play after missing his camp and how good he'll be, that's the biggest question, really.
Right. I was going to ask that too, in terms of like once he gets back into the swing of things. I know obviously the Raiders drafted Zamir White. They've got some other pieces, Brandon Bolden and players like that. Is his role going to change at all once he's back into the swing of things, or do you think it's going to be back to the usual 20 plus touches kind of role for him?
Yeah, I think to at least start the year, kind of while he gets his legs underneath him, they're going to try and give a guy like Zamir White as many touches as they can, and try and kind of do that committee approach again, Patriot way. If you guys all remember, any fantasy owners that have had Patriots running backs in the past know how frustrating that can be. So I think we'll definitely see a little bit more of the committee approach. I don't think Josh Jacobs, or I hope Josh Jacobs is going to lead the league in touches like he did last year and have, I think it was close to like 400 or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I think it'll definitely be a different look. That being said, Zamir White, like, the guy just, for me, he gets frustrating because he doesn't have any like lateral movement skills, and he doesn't make anyone miss. And he's also not like running people over like we saw in college. So this preseason to me, I've kind of watched it. I'm like, man, they could really use Josh Jacobs' his presence and his ability to make guys miss, because he was one of the best at it last year. And Zamir White, that's just not his game, and they won't have that go-to guy like they did last year in the running game if Jacobs isn't there.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, we'll pivot here to probably the second biggest story of the Raiders offseason, obviously acquiring Jimmy G. How has that acclimation process been for him? I know that there was like a little concern about his health. He ultimately passed his physical. He didn't really start many games under Josh McDaniels, even with the relationship and everything like that. So, how has his acclimation to this kind of Josh McDaniels system been so far?
Yeah, so from the reports from camp, it's kind of been up and down. He's struggled a little bit from the beginning, and then he's picked it up, had his good days, actually had some pretty good practices against the 49ers, which is kind of funny given his history with that team, and getting some little bit of retribution for him. Played one drive on what was that, Saturday against the Rams. Looked okay, had a couple passes that I didn't think were great, ended up going for completions though at the very least. Raiders score on the drive, so not a bad start to his tenure. But it's just kind of been up and down. One of the biggest things, and one of my favorite reports that seems to be popping up once a week is, Jimmy G's struggling with the deep ball. I'm like, well, yeah, we kind of knew that.
That's who he is.
Yeah, exactly. Like we knew this. We knew this when we signed him. Like this is not going to be that in the bag for him. So that's one of the biggest misses is, with Derek Carr last year, for all of Derek Carr's faults, Derek Carr could rip it deep, and that's one of the biggest differences between him and Jimmy G. But yeah, it's kind of just been a mixed bag. And obviously the biggest thing with him is, can he stay healthy, which he struggled to do. I mean, bring up the time when he started with Josh McDaniels, he got hurt then and missed a couple starts. So yeah, definitely it'll be interesting to see, but yeah, a lot of up and down so far.
Yeah, I think, the Raiders have some really good weapons, which we can talk about for sure. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can kind of prop him up if he gets injured, if the Raiders season maybe goes south a little bit here. I mean, how much are you buying the Aidan O'Connell stock right now from what you've seen from the preseason?
I mean, I'll tell you what, it's obviously against second and third string guys, but at the end of the day, you can only play against the guys you line up across from. And guys look sharp, man. I mean, the first game he had 3 incompletions, 2 of them were drops, so only one was really his fault. He's been great. He was great last week too, when he filled in for Brian Hoyer. And I mean, right now he's very clearly better than Brian Hoyer, which isn't any sort of huge revelation. Yeah, exactly. He's better than a 38-year-old career-long backup. But again, for a guy that was a 4th-round pick and a rookie, like, he's played really well. And I mean, if it were up to me, I'd probably just let Hoyer loose and or cut Hoyer and roll with O'Connell and see what he's got. I mean, he's proven he can command the offense. One thing that I like about him is, he'll throw the ball where Josh McDaniels wants it, which is that short to intermediate range. But he's also been picking and choosing his shots a little bit. He's been pretty accurate with it. One of the drops I was talking about earlier was a ball he threw to Jay Tucker that was an absolute dime up the sideline, slipped through Tucker's hands. And he did the same thing again up on the seam route last week. So yeah, he's been impressive. Not exactly a guy that's going to be chucking it up like every play like Justin Herbert is, but when he does need that club in his bag or anything like that, he can put it down the field, and of course it's been accurate in the areas that McDaniels wants him to be.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch because I liked O'Connell. For me, he was kind of like my preferred like long-term backup option in the draft. I don't know where you were at with him, but
yeah,
I mean he's exceeded expectations, like you mentioned. The deep ball for me was kind of the concern, and he's like you said, he's looked really sharp in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I kind of felt the same way. Like when they drafted him, like, all right, a guy that you can have around for a while. Maybe he develops into a starter, but at least worth taking a flyer on. Again, if and when Jimmy G gets hurt, maybe he can fill in. So, but so far this year, I'm all aboard the Aidan O'Connell, the hype train. So I'm excited to see what he can do, and hopefully maybe get to see some of him in the regular season and get to see if he can maybe take it over. Because I tell you what, these past 2 games, he's looked really sharp, and I think he's the highest graded quarterback in the preseason by PFF. So whatever that's worth, that's been pretty impressive, been fun to see.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's get to I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, because like from an outsider's perspective, I look at the Raiders offense and I see some really good weapons. I see a quarterback who can distribute the ball. My perspective is that the Raiders offensive line is kind of a concern. Where do you land with this offensive line? How's it looked in preseason and training camp? And is it a concern for Raiders fans?
I think there's a few spots that are concerning, most notably at right guard. Last year was Alex Bars was starting basically from I think week 2 or 3 on, and Alex Bars should not be starting, to put it that way. Like he's a guy that even though they brought him back, I'm like he might get cut. That kind of bad level of bad.
Wow.
But at left tackle, Colton Miller's kind of been a stud to me. He's one of the more underrated guys in the league, and should have been at least a one-time Pro Bowler, maybe 2 times in the last couple of years. Left guard, Dylan Parham isn't going to get going into his second year. I think he's gotten a lot better. Where he struggled last year was in pass protection. And it was a lot of times it was when the defensive line was doing, their stunts and their line games. And it just looked like the game was a little bit faster for him. And he pretty much admitted that earlier in this offseason when he was talking about how the game's starting to slow down for him and he's starting to understand things more. And he was looking sharp in preseason, then goes down in week 1 with the concussion, hasn't practiced since. So a little bit frustrating just given his development. But again, he's looked good so far. Andre James at center. He's kind of a guy for me that I think he's average. You can improve over Andre James, but you can do worse. I think he can be a good pass protector, not going to be a good guy in the run game. Then there's the right guard spot, which is an open competition, looking like it's going to be Greg Van Ruten, who's, again, probably still going to be the weak link on the offensive line. He's a guy that's been a journeyman backup, spot starter type of player. And right tackle, they're actually in a battle right now. It's Jermaine Illuminor, who was really good, especially in pass protection last year, one of the big surprises. And then Thayer Munford, who was a 7th-round pick last year, looked good for being a 7th-rounder. And this year, I actually just got done writing an article up about him. He had a heck of a game against the Rams, was moving people in the running game, showing a little more awareness and pass protection and all that good stuff. So I definitely think, on paper, it's not an offensive line that you're going to notice a whole lot of people. I guess you could say that with a lot of offensive linemen, but it's definitely, something where if you just look at it from the surface level, they're not, it looks like a bottom unit, but I think they can be, that above average type of tier in that, I don't know, maybe top 12 of the league where they can keep this offense afloat. Hopefully they can be a little bit better in the running game last year, especially without Josh Jacobs, and they're going to have to clear out a little bit more lanes. But in the preseason so far, they've been moving people quite a bit. So it's been fun to watch. I definitely think this O-line is getting there and getting better, and is a lot better where they are this year than compared to at the same time last year.
I think that's totally fair. And I do agree, for all the stuff between Chargers and Raiders fans and everything. Like I think Colton Miller's a really good player. Like I do think he is underrated. So I'm with you there. My next question here is kind of a double question here. Like I love hearing like your opposing people's thoughts about like, some of their rookie classes. I think Michael Mayer obviously was somebody who was pretty heavily linked to the Chargers at certain points. Tyree Wilson was never going to be there, but those are the two kind of crown jewels of the Raiders class. What can you tell us about the way that those two have performed? I know Tyree just recently got off the PUP list, but what's the vibes around the two early picks for the Raiders this year?
Yeah, well, like you mentioned with Wilson, he just got back to practice, I think last Wednesday, maybe Tuesday, so a week from today. So, and they've kind of kept the training wheel still on him, played it cautious. So it's kind of hard to say with him. Like, I don't even think he participated in 11-on-11s against the Rams, didn't play in the game. With Mayer, he actually got banged up too during training camp and missed the first preseason game. This last week against the Rams, it was always kind of known he was going to struggle against the run, but it was pretty rough. The first play of the game, he got pushed back probably like 2 or 3 yards in the backfield by a defensive lineman. So that's been the biggest struggle. But again, we kind of knew that going into the season, he's probably going to be a little bit more the receiver as a rookie. But the reviews on him as a pass catcher have been pretty good. He's, the Rams were out there. I don't know if you follow Nate Tice on Twitter, but Nate Tice pointed out they had a cornerback out there on him, which is, pretty special. That's not something you see from a ton from a lot of tight ends. So he's definitely going to be, I think he'll be a good third or fourth option in this offense as a pass catcher and help clear things out for a guy like Devontae Adams. But the run blocking is definitely needs a big work. And then Tyree Wilson is just a matter of got to get him on the field to see what he's got. You know, we know about the physical gifts. We know how long his arms are and how much of a physical force he was at Texas Tech. But
yeah,
all it doesn't matter if you can't play, if you can't get on the field. So that's the biggest thing for him.
Yeah, I mean, what a great situation to be in, though. You know, behind Max Crosby and Chandler Jones. I think kind of sensing a theme there with physical attributes among the Raiders edge rushers.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. They like those long arm guys that can be physical, and that's definitely what Tyree Wilson is, and same with Crosby and Jones. So, but like you said, yeah, it definitely it is nice too. You know, obviously you'd love your top 10 pick to come in and start right away and make a big impact. But the fact that they have Chandler Jones there to kind of serve as that buffer with a guy that's dealing with an injury and don't have to rush him on the field does kind of make that a much better situation for him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like you mentioned, you know, anytime you have that depth, I think is a huge win, even though everybody wants the first round pick to play a lot. But, you know, if there's less pressure on them, then I think it just makes more for a more conducive environment. Yeah, I'm curious about, you know, Patrick Graham to me was somebody who was a pretty hot name, a hot coaching candidate when he was with the Giants. What are your impressions of the kind of growth and progress that they could make on that side of the ball heading into the second year of Patrick Graham's defense?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think one of the frustrating parts is I would like to see them invest in more in like the linebacker position, which I think could help out Patrick Graham's defense, which they just haven't. Like they brought in Robert Spillane, who's, you know, an average to above average linebacker free agent, and then didn't draft one until the 6th round. So I think part of that is because Patrick Graham doesn't really place a whole lot of emphasis on the position. Like if you go back and look at his defenses with the Giants, there's a lot of 2 linebackers, and with you know, that box safety type of player, and as serving as the third guy in the on the second level there.
Sure.
So I think that's kind of what they've been looking at, and that's kind of one of my biggest frustrations. And then in the secondary, the addition of Marcus Peters is going to, I think, help out the defense a lot, just from a ball hawking standpoint and from a leadership standpoint. That was a pretty young position group before they brought him in. So that's one of the biggest things for me is just, you know, can they get that second and third levels up to speed and be able to run the defenses and the complex schemes that Graham likes to run. They've talked about simplifying it a lot this year, which I think they have to do. And I think they had to do last year too, with how many injuries they had on the back end. So that's kind of one of the biggest things is how quickly can those, you know, young players like Ja'Cory Bennett, Nate Hobbs, and all them, you know, pick up the system and hit the ground running and teach it to everybody else. And then 2, can they get more out of their linebacker play, which has been an issue for them over the last couple of years.
Yeah. Marcus Peters, man, we'll see how much he's got left in the tank. I'm really interested to see how that one goes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's I'll tell you what, he has been getting a lot of picks in camp, and there was one practice against the Niners where they had about 6 of them, one of them being Marcus Peters. Wow. And it's kind of been infectious a little bit. So I'm hoping, you know, obviously you bring him in, who is an interception machine, and maybe he'll rub off by some osmosis or something. But yeah, it's definitely they've definitely been more active from what I've been seeing on the practice reports about about creating turnovers, which is good to see.
Yeah, definitely. You know, today's NFL, you got to be very proactive in that regard.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, this has been awesome, man. Appreciate your time today. Where can our listeners go and check you out if they want to get some, like I mentioned, great Raiders intel as well as some draft content through your work as well?
Well, yeah, Stephen, again, appreciate you having me on. But yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. Obviously, going to be posting a lot of Raiders stuff from September to December or so on. But I like to sneak in a lot of draft stuff. The draft is always my baby. So, you know, Chargers fans, come check me out. I'll be posting clips all throughout the regular season and through the draft and all that good stuff. So yeah, follow me on Twitter at mholder95. Again, silverandblackpride.com for my Raiders stuff, and then Bleacher Report. Everybody knows where that's at for any of my draft coverage and all my scouting reports. So appreciate it, man.
There we go. All right, appreciate everybody for tuning into this one. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thanks to Matt for joining us, and Matt, we'll talk soon, I'm sure.
Appreciate it.